Hey guys, this is Rob Greer. There's a Sovereign Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I have my co-host here, Danny.
What's up, guys?
We are very privileged today. This is our first interview with a third guest involved, kind of like Huberman style, Lex Fridman style, and Rogan. And we have Francisco on. I would love to give a brief introduction to Francisco. I've known him for about a month at this point. We have a lot of mutual friends. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's from Portugal and kind of has the international perspective as well. And he's a former astrophysicist, Stanford GSB, and now he's on the cutting edge of voice AI agents, and it's going to be a fascinating conversation. But I'll let him jump in and give his background.
Thank you for having me, guys. Just quick background. Look, I come from physics, as you're saying. Born and raised in Lisbon. Growing up, just started getting excited about solving problems in physics, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I went to study that, did theoretical physics. That was what I really like, which means basically sitting down with the paper and the pen and trying to solve problems, which is an exciting intellectual pursuit. And then I started building a business as well, because we were talking about this earlier. Portugal at the time was the time we were called the pigs, with Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, like those countries in the south of Europe that had no money, right? So taxes were very high. We had the IMF coming in. We call it the Troika. There was not really people spending, but I wanted to also build something, and I started doing tutoring when I was in high school. Initially started with me and a friend playing some PlayStation, Pro Evolution Soccer, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
And then helping him solve some math exercises. He did well in the exam. And then I went to college and started doing more, kept going more demand. And on my second year of college, I started a tutoring business. And then from then, went to, took it to the next level 2 years after, starting it, building e-learning content. And e-learning was really starting at the time. You had guys like Khan Academy, which is now huge. But it was really the beginnings. So we did it for Portugal. We got millions of views in Portuguese. Portugal is a small country, 10 million people, but then you have Brazil, which is 200 million people. And we started having folks in Brazil preferring to watch our classes than to go to class. We got content certified by things like Portuguese Society of Physics, and then we expanded to medicine, finance, and there's still people today that pass in college in Portugal thanks to that. Wow. So that's got me really excited about entrepreneurship. And because I was just studying theoretical physics, that meant I was stuck into, it's the Portuguese university is a bit more like the French one, which means it's very formal. So that means that you were just doing that. There was not like in the US that you kind of go major, you can take classes in whatever you want, and then you get your credits and you graduate. It was just physics and math. And I thought to be an entrepreneur, I needed to first come to the US, because Portugal was a very small market at the time, and with all the context on the economy. And second, that I needed to learn something about business on the real world. So I took a job in consulting at BCG. Also was an international firm, so I saw that as a good, path to come to the US. And BCG is an American firm.
Boston Consulting Group.
Boston Consulting Group.
People that don't know the acronym.
Spent 2 years and a half there, worked in different geographies. And when I got there was, you had these very smart people, and all they're doing is making slides for clients and working long hours. And a lot of the work is repetitive. And I was like, there must be a better way. There must be something to automate repetitive tasks. And it was some, thought that always stayed on me. And then 2 years and a half after that, I came to the US to Stanford Business School, GSB. I did my MBA, and I wanted to build a company in Silicon Valley after. I actually ended up moving to LA, built that company in LA, ended up going the bootstrapping route on the marketing service side and 2 years, a year ago, started working on this new company with my co-founder from the learning platform back in Portugal.
The company that will not be named.
The company that will not be named on episode 1.
Episode 20, yeah.
We'll be back. And yeah, started working on that and what we're doing. I think when I had a friend from Stanford that was at OpenAI early on. So over the COVID years, I'll see him and he'll tell me about, hey, you should check this GPT playground.
Wow, he's early. He's very early.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I remember we were at the
GPT
wedding.
1.5, right?
Yeah, 2.
Yeah.
It was like, you want to do that? You should go to beta.openai, something like that.
Yeah.
And there's the playground. And I start typing. And it's like, yeah, there's something here, like maybe the repetitive task. And that was kind of the initial thought that led to, the whole process of coming where we are and disrupting one of the oldest industries in the world, insurance.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, our last conversation, I think, was about 45 minutes long, and we were just walking through Abakini, but we were just talking about AI in like 2030 at that point, but it's really interesting to get your background. I'm curious on the physics side, because it's a world I'm a stranger to. Who is your what physicist inspired you the most, and what do you think is the most groundbreaking physics, I guess not invention, but discovery over the last century or so?
Couple names. Feynman.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah. I love these books. When I was in college, there's like the 3 red.
Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman.
No, there's that, but then there's the actual
the actual physics.
Not
for simpletons.
Smart thing.
Not for simpletons like me.
Yeah.
And I just love the intuition that he gives in explaining the problems.
Sure.
Next level, explaining simple things. And there's a saying I think people attribute to him that you only know something when you're able to explain it in a very simple manner. Obviously Einstein, because of it's a guy that's made so many contributions in different fields. Right. It's like you look and it disrupted physics. So you asked, what are the main inventions from the last century? It really comes down to general relativity and quantum mechanics, and he started relativity. He did both the special and the general relativity theories. Mm-hmm. And he started the quantum mechanics with the photoelectric effect, which was actually the reason, the discovery that gave him the Nobel Prize. And a couple of years before that, there was a physicist called Lord Rayleigh in the late 1800s that said, physics is almost solved. There's just 2 clouds. One is this thing on the black body radiation, and the other thing is this orbit of Mercury. And the orbit of Mercury was, the discrepancy was like general relativity showed why was that. And the second one was quantum mechanics, right? So this opened a whole new world. And then I think from a society perspective, probably because of quantum mechanics and all the discoveries of last century and solid state physics, we got to semiconductors, which is what empowers.
That's fascinating.
Everything that we have.
I didn't even appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, Einstein, how he could spontaneously conceptualize relativity is just incredible. It's still difficult.
Took him 10 years for the general one.
Yeah, I actually used ChatGPT recently in advance of this conversation to actually explain it like a 5-year-old. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but that's fascinating. But yeah, no, so double clicking on the semiconductor thing, because that could kind of tie it back to the AI revolution that we're experiencing now. I feel like so many people think of AI and they're like, oh, it was birthed into existence in 2022. But meanwhile, there's a much broader history there, and NVIDIA, transformers, and clearly you know this stuff more than me, because I was aware of AI going into 2022, but I hadn't used it and fully appreciated the implications it was going to have on society. So, I mean, I guess you first discovered it around COVID, or you kind of just understood there was an entrepreneurial opportunity during COVID there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not too earlier than you. Was early 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll let Danny jump in. Do you have any questions? All right, cool. So what do you think is the biggest opportunity in AI right now? Just from an extremely high level, like what legacy industries are just going to get completely disrupted, and what role are you going to play in that?
Yeah, look, I think it's a loaded question.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, you have to displace something, right? And right now in the economy, you have people that their job is sitting at the desk and doing repetitive work that causes them to stress, to maybe, I was just with the clients right now, and it's like, what do people do when they're overwhelmed with the tasks that we're solving? And he said, they get stress pills. I bought a dog 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they get hair treatments, right? Because they're losing some of it.
Yeah. They told me, like, there's this guy I knew that, is there. A colleague just called me crying. And there's all these frustrating tasks that people have to do that you can get AI now to start automating. And if you look at the percentage of cost on a company that goes to personnel, right, that is doing these tasks, 60, 70%, of course, depends on the business, but double-digit percentage typically is personal costs.
Right.
What of that is repetitive tasks that there's even labor shortage. You cannot find people, like, hard to convince a young grad 22-year-old that you're gonna now have to sit down and do this repetitive task day after day.
And for all the fear mongering out
Yeah.
there, right? And we're contributing that to a little bit with our podcast, but that's kind of like the 2030s story, right? When it's going to be a substitute for human labor. But I think the story of the 2020s is going to be a complement, right?
Yeah.
And what does it actually mean? It means the elimination of those repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
And what does that mean by extension? It's the productivity gains across the economy.
Yeah.
For those that don't fully appreciate it, that haven't taken a macro class, productivity is a measure of the collective output of the economy. It's a number of heads times the productivity. And if you could uplift the productivity, that leads to significant economic gains. And right now we're at 2%, over the last 20 years, like some really frustratingly low productivity despite the internet. I think this time is different with AI.
Yeah.
And I guess on the productivity question, how do you see that playing out over the next few years? I guess it's, getting rid of the repetitive tasks, but.
Yeah, I think getting rid of the repetitive tasks first will enable businesses to scale, will enable people to concentrate their efforts on more high value stuff that they don't have today. Eventually will enable those people, lead them to more happiness, more fulfillment with their jobs. And we're seeing that. We are live across 3 different countries right now. And that's where I see the impact that we're having on getting people, removing those repetitive tasks from people.
Right.
And I think then it might get to a point where you don't know what's going to happen next. But there's an industrial revolution before. There were jobs displacements, right? And there's new jobs that get created.
Right.
And I think we probably will end up on that, right? What happens when the labor costs go to zero, the energy costs go to zero?
I would love to have that conversation.
That's another conversation.
It's a reason to stay for the rest of this episode.
Yeah. But on the short term, those gains, I think they'll be very beneficial for those who use them and detrimental for those who don't.
Right. I mean, we've said this before, but I think the story from an economic level at a macro perspective is going to be a tale of two economies. It's going to be those that embrace the change and AI enable themselves and those that don't. And the macro is comprised of a bunch of different micros, right? And at the individual level, you kind of have to fundamentally decide, are you going to use AI or are you going to be a Luddite and kind of pretend it doesn't exist, right? Are you going to be the math teachers of the 1950s that are debating, striking about the use of calculators, right, in math classes? Or are you going to get with the program? And I think, this podcast, among many other things, is encouraging people to get with the program.
Yep.
So how are you getting with the program? So, how are you using AI in your personal life? And I guess, why did you decide to pursue this specific opportunity that you're pursuing right now? out of all the universe of opportunities that you could choose?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I wish AI could do for me. For example, I get frustrated when I even have to tell AI how to write an email. I love that that just comes from the mind. Like, you know, that's the level of
You're a Neuralink guy
like
then.
automation I wish we had.
Yeah.
But today, and that's because I'm naturally lazy, and that kind of like the ultimate
Yeah,
laziness.
you're a typical physicist,
Yeah,
right?
just think and shows up done, right?
Yeah.
But I'm using AI. I use, if you want to talk about specific tools, I think Perplexity is a great tool to.
Arvind, something like that. He was
Yeah.
just on Lex Fridman recently. I
Oh
think.
wow, I didn't
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
For people
Yeah, go
that don't know about AI tools, when you name a tool, can you give a little
what is
snippet of
Yeah.
what is it?
Affiliate code. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Shameless plug, affiliate code. Yeah.
No. Unfortunately, there's no affiliates here. Perplexity AI. It's a tool that you use it to search answers, and well, when you go on Google, which is probably what you use to search on the internet, you search something, and then you kind of have to go and navigate through the sources to see it. With Perplexity, you search and it gives you the answer, and then it gives you the sources that base the answer on.
Right.
So that saves a lot of time when you're trying to search things. And if you think about, if you're a knowledge worker, whatever you do, right? Like how many times are you searching things on a daily basis?
Right.
Yeah, I use Perplexity every day.
Yeah, I mean, Perplexity in a nutshell, it aims to be a Google killer, right? Google's had an absolute monopoly in search, and they aim to take a piece of that market share.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways it is the next step in the evolution of search. I think Google is learning a thing or two from them and kind of conforming their business model a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about citations is really important, right? Because we're rapidly entering an era where AI-generated content as a percentage of the total internet is going to be skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And what is truth, right? I think there's like some pretty interesting cryptographic applications where I have a specific cryptographic phrase, and all I put out to the internet is associated with that phrase, and that's how people determine whether it's true or not, where it came from me.
Yeah.
But in the context of Perplexity, it's interesting. You pose a question and you say, source this, and you can actually trace the human-generated content, the precedent from where it's coming from, and I think that's important in a potential post-truth era, right?
It's all about the source.
Yeah.
For
first principles, right?
Yeah.
Physics. But and then also like just some random thought I had. So part of like the intent of this podcast is to teach people how to use AI in their personal business lives. And so I would encourage people to use Perplexity, but then also if you have a query that you would typically outsource to Google, try putting in the ChatGPT and see what happens. I think many times it's not universal, but 90% of the queries that I previously did on Google, I now do on ChatGPT, and that's how I kind of built that muscle memory too. I mean, you were mentioning, right? Like you are still not at the point where your first thought is going to AI, and like it's gradually getting there. But I think if you just put it in the ChatGPT, you'll just see the miracle that it really is.
Yeah, there is that muscle memory indeed.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Enrico Fermi?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Fermilab, Chicago.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so like on the last podcast we were talking about this, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. This might be redundant for some people, but there's like the Fermi moment in 1942 when he did that nuclear reactor, I think, like in Chicago, and people were freaking out about it, not because of the potential radiation or like the 3 Mile Island kind of thing, but because of what that represented in terms of what the next 3 to 5 years were going to look like in terms of physics, specifically within the atomic bomb, right, and a hydrogen bomb. Do you think the Fermi moment for artificial intelligence was 2022, and now the next 5 years are going to kind of pave the way for some like extremely rapid progress, the atomic bomb of AI? Like, do you think that's coming?
Yeah. So I'll answer that with an anecdote. In 2017, crypto was booming, right? And I landed with a friend in Lisbon right before Christmas, and the Uber driver started shilling us Bitcoin.
He's probably not driving an Uber anymore.
This was at the peak, so
It was at the top, not at the
the top.
beginning.
Yeah, but the local top at that point was
yeah, exactly.
15,000, right?
If you kept holding, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, gotta have those diamond ends, right? That's how
Yeah.
they call them.
Yeah.
And
I love that. Yeah. We should talk about crypto. Are you into crypto?
I like crypto, yeah.
Okay, cool. We haven't talked about it on the podcast yet.
Yeah, so I mean, that was the moment which, I just came from my first 3-4 months in the US, and there's everyone in Portugal is talking about crypto, right?
Yeah.
And it's rare to see something that goes so ubiquitous so fast. And in crypto at that point, that meant crash. And actually 3 years after, or 4 years after, in LA, an Uber driver started shilling me Shiba Inu, and then shortly after he crashed,
This is not financial advice.
not financial advice,
Do
but
not.
NFA.
just do what you want to do with
Well,
this
it's cool
information.
with crypto, it's one of those things where like the hype exceeds the reality, and there's kind of that irrational exuberance in many cases.
Yeah.
And in crypto, it's interesting, like what you said about Portugal. It's something I experienced when I was in Argentina. I was there for 5 months when I was digital nomading, and it's one of those things where those countries were quicker adopters because they were using crypto for the intended use case,
Yeah.
right? Which is an alternative to fiat currencies. I don't know if we want to dedicate the entire discussion to crypto, but there is an interesting intersection between AI and cryptocurrency, because what is crypto? It aims to be decentralized. And when people are talking about dystopian scenarios within the AI context, there's the authoritarian scenario, and then there's AI as an independent entity that's not aligned with humans' alignment, right?
Yeah.
It's core concepts. But what about decentralized training? What about open source plus decentralized as a way to ensure that the sociopaths at the head of centralized organizations are not going to turn themselves into gods? Do you think that a decentralized AI that's in the hands of every single person on this globe, as opposed to in the hands of the United States government or in the hands of Sam Altman or Dario at Anthropic, is something that reduces the probability of dystopia?
Yeah, that's a loaded one. I think this, yes. I mean, if you have a decentralized, right now one of the biggest concerns of people with AI is that AI is being made on these corporations,
Yeah.
right?
And they have the profit incentive. It's
And they have
social
the
media
profit
happening
incentive.
all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have Microsoft and you have Google. But I think the way the system is built today, it's very hard for you have one single person controlling the whole thing.
Mhm.
Because all these companies, have governance in place. A lot of these companies have, you can own their shares, right?
Mhm.
So there's also the financial incentives that can be distributed. But yes, it's not the same as you have something fully decentralized.
Yeah.
I spent some time in crypto, and a lot of people in crypto are excited about DAOs.
Mhm.
DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. And what I found out looking at the DAOs was that actually turned out into very political organizations that wouldn't get shit done.
Mhm.
So there's that trade-off. I think that we need to figure out for these decentralized organizations in how to make, get shit done, right? And not lose, and at the same time, not concentrate too much the power.
I mean, one thought on the decentralized AI and then pivoting the DAOs, because I'm glad you brought that up. So on decentralized AI, there's this platform called BitTensor, and the ticker is TAO, Tau. I think, in 2017, when you were in your Uber drive in Lisbon, that was when Ethereum was first getting birthed into existence. And Ethereum is decentralized finance at its core. And it's at a point now where it actually has utility, and people are talking about it getting an ETF alongside Bitcoin, and maybe if a change of administration happens, the probability of that happening goes up. BitTensor is essentially a decentralized AI, decentralized to AI, like Ethereum is decentralized to finance. So if anyone wants to go down a rabbit hole, I would encourage you to do that. And I'm not trying to pump my bags. It's really interesting, and I think it's the future of AI. I think open source is the future of AI. Open source is consistently 6 to 9 months behind the centralized organizations, but I think that gap compresses. Because if you have the collective whole of software engineering talent that's working on decentralized AI, and it's peeling developers from centralized organizations like OpenAI and Anthropic and those institutions, it's entirely possible that it moves faster. But on DAOs, you said it's political. That assumes that humans are the composition of those DAOs.
That's that's a very good point.
So yeah, I don't know if AIs are capable of getting political. I don't know, maybe. I mean, I guess what I mean there is that DAOs, those could just be a million AI agents, right? I think it's the future of the corporation. I mean, I hope that SobDoc and my company Avenir are DAOs by definition in a few years.
Yeah.
Just not in the current definition of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the DAOs, there's a very exciting part about the DAOs as well, which is the A, right? It runs autonomous. And there's,
A for AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be the story. That's actually probably a good segue back to voice AI, which is kind of what you're working on, right? And you can go into as much detail as you want. But the story, I mean, I think of the last 2 years is just like this shiny new toy, right? Text to text. We were talking about it's like 32 megabyte hard drives in the 1980s, right? And we have something that's far better at this point. I think the evolution of the computer interface is going towards voice, right? A her world where you're interacting with it in real time, and agentic features. So you're able to give instructions to the AI, and then it gets to work done on your behalf. It delegates things to your human employees, and ultimately it delegates things to a swarm of AIs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, kind of from a high level, on voice AI, her, ChatGPT 4.0, and some of the features that are going to get launched soon with that?
Yeah, I think people will prefer to speak with AI than with humans.
That's a big statement.
For many cases.
I love that.
For many cases.
But what does that do to society? If humans start to shift to prefer to only speak with AI than other humans?
For certain use cases.
Okay,
right?
only certain use, not like everything.
For certain interactions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's also many different preferences, right? Maybe some people are introverts. Maybe they prefer to speak with an AI, and
it's lower pressure, right?
Yeah. It's lower pressure. You can play with it as you want, right? You can experiment. There's different things. But I think from a business context, right? For many of the interactions, people are going to prefer to speak with an AI, a good AI, not a bad AI.
Yeah.
And the experience is only going to get better from now on.
Yeah, I think there's two things that I laugh about when I have conversations with people about AI. It's one, AI is never going to be able to do that. I'm like, just give it some time. It'll do everything. It's going to take your job for sure, eventually. And the second thing is I prefer to use a human because AI is going to be increasingly humanized over the next couple of years. It's going to have a voice like Scarlett Johansson talking in your ear, and it's going to have emotion and tonality, and it's going to know you. So you're going to befriend it, and people are going to fall in love with it. And so what are some of those use cases that you described where people might prefer to use an AI rather than a human? And what are your thoughts on kind of like the disclosure requirements that are presumably going to come from a regulatory standpoint around, if you're speaking with someone, is that someone an AI? Does that have to be disclosed?
Yeah. I'll start with the latter. I don't know what the regulation is going to be. Mm-hmm. What I think, my opinion, is that it shouldn't be disclosed, but you shouldn't lie to people, right? So if you're able to provide a really good interaction as an AI to someone, and that is solving someone's problem, or is adding value, I won't need it to be disclosed. You're getting value out of it. Mm-hmm. But then if you ask, are you an AI, right? You kind of want to know, right? You don't want to be lied to.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts. And what are the use cases, right? That's the use cases that I see mostly for voice AI. I mean, there's the obvious ones, right? Customer service. There's, you call to any airline today, and you have a very bad experience. You have to go through IVRs, then you have to go through people that, are splitting their time across multiple systems and trying to find information, and they don't know. And last month, I actually had a problem with an airline. And every time I would call, people will tell me a different thing.
It's terrible. It's a terrible
Yeah.
experience, right?
Inconsistent, terrible
Yeah.
experience. And that's for you as a customer. For the people leading the business, the airline in this case outsourced this to a company. And it's affecting their customer experience. And then that company is just taking the risk of then hiring the people for the call center, training them, and then having them leave, double-digit turnover rates year over year. So you have this experience that definitely could be much better than AI. But what I think as well is that when you're buying a product, people will prefer to speak with an AI than to humans.
Right.
For a lot of products that today, that might seem like crazy. And, one example would be going to a drive-through and ordering with AI.
Yeah.
That's a, low value transaction. But I think people will get to the point where they're buying, software products, not, enterprise products yet, but software products. They will prefer to interact with an AI that is much more knowledgeable about the products that you're buying. Today, if you want to buy a software tool that is some sort of sales-led motion, that means you have to talk with an SDR that is going to qualify you.
I want to talk about that too.
Is going to ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, you're just trying to get the hands on the product. What's the deal here? And maybe you ask a question, it's like, I don't know. I need to get to, my AE is going to get the next question. And then you have to call it the AE and it's like, no, my sales engineer is going to come. And he's going to give you the answer.
What is something we have all in common as entrepreneurs? We're in the business of pain relief.
Yeah.
Right? And so where there's pain across the economy, solving that pain and relieving that pain is quite lucrative.
Yeah.
And so I'm of the view that anything that requires the virtual communication between people are going to prefer AI.
Yeah.
Texting, emailing, talking to anything. And so I think that's why, people that are going into the real life event business are probably choosing the right area, because I think that there's going to be more value to in-person interactions, at least until there's full dive virtual reality, right? In the 2030s and it's Ready Player One.
Yeah, who knows by them. But I think what he's saying is right, right? There's going to be relief from pain. There's going to be more free time. People are going to be able to have more human interactions. And I think that's the beauty of AI, because it's going to enhance productivity. It's going to remove the annoying job. And you're going to have more time, right? 4-day work week.
Right.
So what are the bottlenecks right now? In what areas of the economy, the voice-based interactions, is the AI not smart enough? And will it be smart enough with GPT 4.5 and 5? Is it just a matter of the real-time, instantaneous, low-latency communication that we saw demonstrated by OpenAI with 4.0 across the economy? And it's going to just happen overnight because of the economic incentive to do that? Or are there certain use cases where it's not smart enough yet? For example, with customer service, I feel like that's low-hanging fruit, right? And with SobDoc and the doctor practice side, a lot of the doctor practices, one of which we know, the common pain point is intaking patients, right? And taking that flood of calls. And I think AI could probably do that. That's table stakes, right?
Yeah.
But can I deploy AI to cold call doctors for me?
Well, that today you can't.
Right.
The FCC already regulated that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could, and I think there should be, some regulation. By the way, that regulation came because people were doing spam calls with Joe Biden's voice.
Yeah.
So, and they banned. Because of that, cold calling is interesting because if you are a business owner, do you want to be cold called?
Do I want to be cold called?
Yeah.
I actually take some sometimes.
You take some.
Yeah.
Why?
I do.
You don't. The answer is no.
No,
you really don't.
No, I absolutely do. If they leave a voicemail and it's a cold call and it's something that has potential utility, I'll call them back. But I don't take it if it's a random number.
If has potential utility.
Yes.
So, as an entrepreneur, the intelligent decision will be to take all the cold calls in the world and filter them, and knowing that you're not losing any opportunity.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
When you ban cold calling, right, it means you're banning AI cold calling will just increase the number of cold calls. Like people will be spam, right? It's true.
But can I just get an AI to take it on my behalf and filter it?
Yeah, but what if you can get an AI and then you kind of
Yeah.
have a market,
Well, that's what I'm saying, right?
an efficient market.
Yeah, with this interview, right? Like
Yeah.
we interfaced, you and I, over the last 7 days, and like I don't think either of us really like that. We just want to get to the fucking interview and talk, right?
Yeah.
What about in 2 years when we're doing interview number 40 when he's talking about his company and the 9-figure valuation they just raised their Series C at? It's just my AI
Yeah.
and Danny's AI coordinating with your AI.
Yeah.
And then we just show up here
Yeah.
and the magic happens. Yeah.
And then we can enjoy maybe a bit more of the beautiful Palisades.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think there should be a license for AI cold callers. Like
Yeah.
there should be people that are allowed to, okay, your business can do AI cold
Totally.
calling. Because you don't want to have people, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you want to train because it's hard, but if it's like, it's a fucking frustrating job
Yeah.
to be pounding the phones.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Or do you want to be really aggressive, right? Like, I almost feel like we're entering a new economy and the stakes are high,
Yeah.
and the market share is going to be accumulated by those that take decisive steps, even if they are breaking through some of the regulations. It's one of those things where you're pulling a Mark Zuckerberg and moving fast and breaking things because a regulation just isn't
And
relevant.
a lot of it is also gray area, right?
Yeah.
There's not really regulation
like
for
gray
AI
areas
because
too, yeah.
AI is a new thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, not permission, right? And like, is it one of those things where like, you know, the centralized institutions are just like shamelessly scraping data from each other, right? Like OpenAI is stealing data from YouTube, and the health institutions are getting their data scraped, the New York Times, the Washington Post. And the reality is like, yeah, maybe OpenAI has to pay a couple $1 billion in 3 years, but that'll be a drop in the bucket relative to their
Yeah.
ARR at that point, right?
Yeah. I think Sam Altman already made it clear that
Yeah, and maybe
he's not
if it's-
going to look at cost to achieve.
Yeah, we can have a conversation about Sam anytime. But maybe it's not one of those things where it's cold calling, but it's the lead gen is coming in on a cold email basis, on a cold LinkedIn DM, on a cold Instagram basis. And then they're taking the first call, the qualification call, whereas I'm not taking it anymore. And what that allows us to do is like, we filter out the irrelevant client leads, just like we're filtering out the irrelevant cold calls, right? Because I only want to hop on the phone if there's a hot lead. It's
Yeah.
a doctor that's ready to convert. And that increases my value of time,
Yep.
and it increases the conversion rate that I'm going to get.
Yep.
So maybe that's a use case. I mean, do you think once a doctor is on the phone with the AI, do you think it's capable of like fully digesting my company, my value proposition, maybe even in my voice, and like kind of articulating that and acting in a sales capacity?
It's definitely capable of asking qualifying questions and, share the value prop and, have an initial conversation. But these systems are still, the reasoning capabilities are still not there.
Right. Is it an intelligence thing or is it a latency thing?
Intelligence thing.
Okay, so it's not there yet. I mean, when do you think it's going to be there where, let's say we're filming this podcast virtually in 2 years.
Yeah.
Do you think we could just have AI Rob, AI Danny, and AI Francisco talking?
We could have it today, but the conversation maybe will be more
What about
interesting.
That would be kind of funny to try it, right? Just to see how elementary it would be.
or
Where
not,
it would
right?
go.
Or not.
Reid Hoffman has his Reid AI. That
Right.
Yeah.
I saw that. He was asking himself questions. And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But when do you think we could have an equivalent conversation?
I don't
in
know.
all of
I'm not
AI?
placing bets in time.
Yeah. What about
in
your
the speed of model? I've been wrong many times.
Your 75% confidence interval, like 2026, 2027?
Yeah, before 2030, I think.
Before 2030.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, think about the implications for the economy at that point, right?
Yeah.
Entering a new economic paradigm.
yeah,
And it sounds like, based on what you were saying before about how the implementing AI into the business, eliminating repetitive tasks, increasing efficiency, lowering costs, all of these things, like the permeation into the economy or through the workforce, right? Because then healthcare costs go down, right? People get sick less. People take better care of themselves. They're not taking antidepressants,
Yeah.
right? Like,
SSRIs, yeah.
yeah, which is like, again, the labor cost outside of the hourly wage is astronomical, right? It's all the
Yeah.
affiliated costs with that human labor.
yeah.
So it seems like and I always ask Rob about this too, is like, are you on the utopian side of AI or are you on the dystopian side of AI, right? So it's like, from what you're saying, it sounds like that the solution to you looks like we're going to the utopian side versus more of like, well, Skynet, Terminator 2, it's gonna, you know, like AI will realize humanity is, you know, like an issue, right? And something needs to be done about it, right? So you're saying like it's going in the right way and humanity's gonna benefit in a big way from it.
I believe on that, maybe because I'm an optimist. But also I think that if AI is that evolved, more evolved than the human, right? It will be able to understand that the human is not, you know, it will be able to deal with the human danger, right? And if AI is built in a way that is not malefic, right? I want to believe we are on the utopian side.
Yeah.
What I think is that on the way there, you know, we talked about how removing these tasks could be, you know, removing frustration and stress from people. Mm-hmm. That's true, but I think what might happen is that then you have social media, you have, you know, all these things sucking your attention.
Right, so it's just going to go to another negative place.
It's going to go to another.
Instead of like, oh, now I can be outside and run around for an extra 2 hours.
Yeah, some people will do it.
Right, of course.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a distribution of probabilities, right? Like if you're putting on your mathematician hat, mathematics is like what the language of physics in many ways, right?
True.
If you're putting on your mathematician hat, it's a distribution of probabilities. Like
Yeah.
Elon says, you know, 80% likelihood that it's utopia, 20% that it's not, and that 20% is why he founded Neuralink.
Yeah.
How much of that, you know, the repetitiveness in people's jobs is contributing to SSRIs, right? Who knows? What are your thoughts on the post-labor economy that is coming with AI?
When?
I guess it's a good question. I mean, can we agree that it's coming within our lifetimes?
I mean, in our lifetimes.
Yes.
That we are, you know, changing jobs.
That there's no such thing as a human job anymore.
I think there will still be human jobs.
What do you think has staying power from a job perspective?
Like 6 jobs.
Professionals. What do you mean? So
I don't know, man.
Have
you seen Ex Machina?
No.
The Ex Machina movie with Oscar Isaac in it. You've seen it, right? Dude, those robots are fucking sexy, man. Yeah. Westworld. I don't have to ask you these loaded questions.
No, maybe that was a joke, but yeah, it's true. Like if you are able to mimic bio tissues, and then even that job is
all bets are off at that point.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, anything like that's. I know we have to see, like. Innovation might happen so fast, things might happen so fast, but we as a species, we're very adaptable.
Correct.
Right? So we'll find ways. I'm positive on humanity.
What's your reaction to me saying that the marriage of humans and AIs are the next step in the evolution of humans?
That means that you have an AI that like crack the way you can mate AI with humans.
Or just Neuralinks in our head, right? I mean, we're well on our way to cyborgs at that point.
Yeah. But can a Neuralink and a Neuralink mate and create another Neuralink as a baby? Or as a baby you still need to implement the chip?
What about the Fermi paradox?
What's the, remind me?
That's the paradox of like the size of the universe is unfathomably large, right? Mm-hmm. It's an atom in our solar system. That's the planet Earth, right? Mm-hmm. But why have we not kind of encountered aliens? I guess that's the paradox, right? It's so infinitely large, but at the same time we haven't encountered aliens yet.
But it's finite, right?
It's not infinitely large, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, those are still there's still different observations. But yeah, if it's still limited, there's still, the probability can be very small, right?
Right. And that's why Elon is saying like the light of consciousness of humanity, the collective humanity, is so precious.
Yeah.
That's why we need to diversify our planetary base.
Yeah.
That's why we have to reduce the probability of nuclear war and Armageddon. And that's why we have to make sure that we're aligned with superintelligence when it does come.
Yeah.
And I feel like humans have this arrogance around intelligence too, right? They're like, surely there couldn't be anything that's as intelligent as us in the universe, right? Because we're so important.
Yeah.
Or, something that exceeds our intelligence. But that is coming. Like, humans do not have a monopoly on intelligence, right? It's a spectrum. And like most humans are like, we're at this end of the spectrum, when in reality it's like, maybe it's here.
Yeah.
And maybe it already exists in the universe. Or maybe it doesn't.
Maybe it does, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, maybe it did 2 billion years ago.
Yeah.
And maybe you just reach this filtration point, I think they call it, right? Where it's like you develop this sufficiently powerful technology and you have it in the hands of humans and they manage to commit planetary suicide in the process, right? And you have to get through that great filter. and that's kind of, why Elon wants to go to Mars, for example.
Yeah. I mean, Mars is still it's very close.
Yeah.
If you compare with the scale of the universe, it's the first step. But I agree. I think humanity needs to be preserved.
What about multi-universe and simulation theory? I guess that's like a little bit physics related, right?
Like having
Yeah, multi-universe, and I guess like simulation theory, right? Like, is this like the first reality, or is this just some third grader's science experiment?
I tend not to dwell too much on that.
You're lucky.
Just yeah. But yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Like, there's a lot we don't know about the universe today. There's a lot we don't know, we don't understand even from a physics perspective. But that's also something I'm really excited about AI, is the ability to help us understand more deeply the challenges of the universe, of nature, which is really what physics is about.
If you accept as true that by 2027, the AI will be so good, it's going to be comparable of an AI researcher or a PhD level researcher, just to generalize. And not only raw intelligence, but it's capable of, long-term planning, long-term memory, acting on those long-term plans. And you have an unlimited number of Albert Einsteins by 2029. What do you think that does for the field of physics?
Will be very, very interesting. Maybe we could solve a lot of problems. You could, if you have an AI Einstein, right? Like, it's a big if. But you could start looking at the areas of physics that you don't understand. Like, Einstein spent the last years, I think actually the biggest majority of his physics career, trying to solve the unification of physics gravitation with quantum, right?
Yeah.
And he couldn't. And there's all these different theories. There's also a block there, which is what the experiment can measure, right? And a lot of physics is an experimental science. It means that you can do all these theories, but you're trying to describe observations, trying to describe nature, right? And we're still at the point that where, for example, gravitational waves were observed for the first time 10 years ago, the last 10 years, I don't remember exactly when, which was something that was predicted, decades ago, right? So there's this lag, and maybe it's able to, AI is, even if you don't have the AI Einstein, just the ability that you can have like better technology that could help compress that could be very interesting.
Yeah, do you agree with this statement that AI will definitely accelerate science over the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
And it's very tough to project what happens on the bedrock of those innovations, right?
Yeah.
And your point is that these innovations happen, these discoveries happen.
Yeah.
we're just uncovering stones. We're not inventing anything with physics, right?
Yeah.
We're just uncovering the answers of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And we have presumably what, a 0.1% understanding of what that's actually a good question. Like, what percentage of the universe, of like these grand questions of how the universe is governed, do you think we have an understanding of as humans?
Any answer that you give, you could put yourself in the position of Lord Rayleigh, right? There's
Yeah.
just two clouds, but you then use those two clouds, you open, and there's like, well, and then there's, I mean, if you look, it's almost like, you know, you're an entrepreneur, right? Like you solve one problem, create another problem. You solve one problem, create another problem.
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Right. But that's like the progression of humanity, right? And yeah, I think it's a good thing.
But
solving
that's
these
good
problems.
because it's
Yeah.
like you always are chasing something that is challenging, right? It creates that drive.
What are you most excited about over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, where would you like to see yourself?
I think very excited about disrupting one of the, you know, legacy industries with the perspective of adding a lot of value to the industry, to humanity. I think that's something that gets me very excited.
That is so deliciously cryptic. I can't wait to see what you put together.
Focus on the outcome for this conversation
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having a lot of fun across the way. I think it's important to have fun and liking what you do. Yeah.
What entrepreneurs have you been most inspired by? Like, I mean, as you looked at history, not even people alive today. Is there anyone that kind of comes to mind? Anyone that maybe we wouldn't otherwise think about, like anyone notable in Brazil or Portugal or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the Portuguese disrupted commerce in the 1500s, by late 1400s, by discovering the maritime way to India. Right, commerce was done before by going through land, through, you know, was based in Venice. Right, Venice was kind of in Genova, were the main ports to Europe, and commerce, the trade will go through, you know, all the Saudi Peninsula and that area to Asia, where we're getting the products. And what Portugal did was, okay, we went by sea, and now you're disrupting the old economy, you bring the cost down, and started importing all these spices from India, right? And then all these sort of products. You know, I don't know if the entrepreneur was, there's a couple people, kings and names. I don't know if I can pinpoint to one, but that's maybe something that's very, you know, an interesting disruption concept. Today, there's many. I think we are also in the era now that we start celebrating more the entrepreneur, and
That's the beauty of the United States.
yeah, that's the beauty of America. That's true, and you can empower more entrepreneurs.
Celebrating failure.
Yeah,
Having very favorable bankruptcy law.
yeah,
Not throwing you in the debtor's prison.
yeah,
That's the economic miracle of the United States.
yeah, and people supporting, right? Like supporting that spirit. That doesn't exist in Europe.
Right, and it should. What do you love most about Portugal?
About Portugal, dude, Portugal is home. I guess I love that.
Lisbon is beautiful, man.
Yeah, just the culture, the food, the weather, the people, you know, family, friends there. Ronaldo. Yeah.
What's your favorite part about being in the U.S.?
The favorite part about being in the U.S. U.S. is just an amazing country, because of what we're talking about, right? Like, it's a special place, which, you know, just creates a whole spectrum of, you know, people, ideas, which is good, and it has been able to stay at the forefront for the last couple of years, and I think the system now we point a lot of things on it, but it somewhat still works in favor of the common benefit. I think the U.S. for me as an immigrant it's a place where you can come, you build this, big economy, lots of opportunities. People are open to innovation. That's very exciting.
Yeah, and it's not like we don't have our issues, right? If it's beyond 6 o'clock right now, the debates are happening right now between Biden and Trump.
Oh, well.
We're a very polarized society. But it's one of those things where it's like Tina, right? It's mostly in the stock market, but like there's no alternative if you're looking to accumulate wealth and become an entrepreneur in the United States. And say what you will, we're polarized in many cases. We're on the cusp of a civil war here, hopefully not. But we're also leading from a technological perspective in AI. And there's a lot of geopolitical implications of this. In many ways, it's what's happening in AI is analogous to what was happening with the atomic bomb, right? Like in Germany, I don't know the exact physics behind this, but it was something with water, like they went down the wrong path with atomic, and that was decisive, right, in World War II. And, AI, I think we have a 2-year lead on China right now. I think that's kind of the common consensus, but that could compress.
Yeah.
And the more that compresses, the more dangerous things get.
Yeah, 100%. There's a great book called Chip Wars that talks about, how the semiconductors, the chips are really kind of influencing that. I think US is well positioned, but those things change, right? There's, chips have been around for a couple decades. There was,
NVIDIA,
different periods.
Gaming chips,
Intel, right? Like,
for sure.
Yeah, like, but yeah, it's.
Did you see Oppenheimer?
I saw, yeah.
What do you think?
It's a good movie.
It's great, right? Was all the physics sound?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
That ending was like one of the best things I've ever seen, where it was Oppenheimer talking to Einstein at the pond.
Yeah.
And Oppenheimer was saying, about what I said about the chain reaction, right? Because during the movie they were afraid that the atomic bomb was going to set off a chain reaction that lit up the atmosphere. And Einstein was like, we solved that problem. And Oppenheimer was like, well, I think we set off a chain reaction that might destroy humanity, putting the atomic bomb in the hands of humans.
Yeah.
Quite a movie. Christopher Nolan. He's good, man.
It was good, very, very good movie. And I had read recently the biography of Einstein, so a lot of the...
Was that by Walter Isaacson?
Yeah.
Walter Isaacson is great.
Great, yeah.
Da Vinci, Steve Jobs, most recently Elon Musk.
Yeah.
He also did the woman that was behind CRISPR, whose name is escaping me, gene editing. But he's an amazing biographer.
Yeah.
Any other books that you kind of have shaped your view on life, or kind of changed your life?
It's Fooled by Randomness. It's a book by a trader, Nassim Taleb, I think.
Oh yeah, Skin in the Game, Anti-Fragile.
Yeah, Black Swan.
Yeah.
I mean, just gives a good perspective and how you should think about, randomness, and maybe that a lot of people overweight success on what they can do, and a lot of it is actually external factors.
Do you think that things are random, or that they're pre-written?
I mean, it's a book about trading, right?
Oh,
so
I see,
it's I think a lot of things are out of your control, but my theory is that you gotta, if you maximize the number of shots on the goal, if you keep increasing your, efficacy on getting the ball on the goal, and if you keep extending the time that you have to shoot on the goal, then great outcomes will happen, even if things are random, right?
Right.
So that's how I think about it.
Right. Yeah, it's like one of those things where if you're taking a half-court shot in the NBA, the odds that you're going to hit that in the first shot is pretty low.
Yeah.
But if all you do is just take half-court shots over and over again, like Steph Curry does, a lot of them are going to go in.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like a metaphor for entrepreneurship almost.
Yeah.
That was almost in and of itself addressing the last question I had before we circled to Danny, but what was kind of the biggest advice you would offer to entrepreneurs? I guess you probably have a lot of friends that are still in the workforce, like I do.
Yeah.
And I'm endlessly, trying to encourage them to at least start side businesses. What would you say to your friends that are interested in entrepreneurship, but reticent to kind of take the plunge?
I've been able to interact with a lot of smart people in these different environments, and I think a lot of it is just personality, how risk averse you are. For example, in consulting, a lot of folks are more risk averse. They make good money. It's a good paying job, but they wouldn't make the jump. And it's kind of in their nature, like to be, in some, even my friends came to the US, and it's not just not their, they struggle to make that jump, to take that risk. So that's why I usually tell people, just start. It's, you gotta start, it's painful, it's very painful, but still rewarding,
Yeah, do you think entrepreneurship is for everybody?
I think so too. I wish it would be. I wish it would be. But I think some people have a big, a difficulty in overcoming, starting it. That's.
Speaking of starting it, like, how did you actually get started? Like, when you left, like, explain the steps, right? Because you had the consulting gig,
Yeah.
and then you went from that to entrepreneurship. So, like, what happened to go from that to full-time, I'm running a business?
Yeah, was, came to the US, business school. You go to Silicon Valley. Your professors are Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, all those big tech guys. And I came here to the US because I wanted to start a business. So that inspired me a lot. And then I started, the day after graduation, with my co-founder and a friend. We started building. We're already kind of doing some things before. Day after graduation, we drove down to LA, and we started. Yeah, that was it. And
You just jumped in with both feet.
Yeah,
You're like, we're doing this.
we're doing this.
How'd you pay your bills?
That's one of the first hurdles that you have to go through, and that's challenging, especially when you don't have funds. And what we did, we figured out ways to sustain for a couple months. Then we raised some capital. Then we took it from there. Then we broke even. We grew the business from there. Yeah, but that's always the hard step, especially when you are in corporate and you have a good salary. It's very hard for people to jump in. But I knew I wanted to jump in. I didn't want to go back to Portugal to work on a corporate job in a small market.
Right.
So for me, it was very clear.
Well, that's kind of the issue, right? The golden handcuffs. And that impacts people's risk aversion.
Yeah.
Plenty of friends that are in private equity and legal and consulting and software engineers. But what I would say to those people is there's going to be commoditization of all those things very quickly. Certainly on like the legal and consulting side, where a lot of what they're doing are, at the beginning of the podcast, creating those presentations and doing those Excel spreadsheets. Those things are going to go away by humans very quickly. And even software engineering, right? We were just talking about Claude 3.5 Sonnet.
Yeah.
It's incredible what it's capable of. You don't have to have this proprietary language acquisition like Ruby on Rails or Java or C++ anymore. I could just talk English and talk it to a computer, and out spits the application. You don't even need the computer languages anymore, right? And what was the last thing? I mean, private equity, I think those people are a little safer, but...
Private equity is good because you have ownership, right? And
equity ownership.
Yeah, and private equity, I don't call that, depends, there's funds and funds, right? But I have friends in private equity, and it's honestly one of the best risk-reward profiles to
get to 8 figures, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. To get to 9, it's kind of tough because I think a lot of the early gains of private equity have been had. Like those 9 to 10 figure outcomes, the guys are already at the top of the pyramid and they're not leaving anytime soon. Henry Krause is still at KKR. Steve Schwarzman is still at Blackstone.
But you can do that in mid-cap. You start a billion, half a billion, $1 billion funds, you raise, funds every 3 years. You 3x the funds, and you get to $100 million network.
Yeah, I guess like private equity, that's an interesting one because in terms of the actual investment strategy, it's going to evolve with AI, right? Like what we're talking about, AI enabling companies. You just buy a legacy company and AI enable it. What does it actually mean? It means Gordon Gekkoing the organization and cutting a lot of people and replacing people with AI. But it's also refining the software stack and improving the SOPs and the automations to increase the EBITDA margin. I think what we're going to see over the course of the next 5 years are EBITDA margins unlike anything we've seen in the history of business.
Yeah.
Like margins going to like 70%.
And what's going to be very interesting is when you're going to have software companies that are going to be buying legacy business, software companies that are disrupting work.
What would their rationale be for that?
You buy a business at 4x multiple, and then you do that margin, and then you will value that as a manual business, and now you can value it as a software business.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if software is commoditized, what actually is the catalyst for that commoditization? It's reducing barriers to entry. Like, we could literally dream up an app now, and it could be functional within 24 hours, whereas 2 years ago, it would take, 2 months to get to an MVP? So people are just going to be able to come up with ideas, and going from an idea to an actual product is going to be compressed in a big way.
Yeah.
And so that reduces the barriers to entry. There's more entrants, forces, right?
Market's more efficient.
Right.
Yeah.
And that squeezes out the profits. So I think your moat, your unique differentiator as an entrepreneur has never been more critical.
And that's why I think that there's going to be more entrepreneurs.
Yes. Forced.
Yes, forced, non-forced. There's going to be, as you said, it's going to be faster to do, there's lower barriers to entry, but there's still going to be so many niche opportunities that can become really compelling.
Right.
And that's a good way to achieve differentiation in this world.
Right.
Because you're going to be able to serve some specific sort of needs and have a solution for that specific sort of needs, even though if the market is not that big. So you have a world that you have a lot of people that are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And these niche businesses, and you kind of start seeing that, like people, small business owners now being more and more celebrated, right? Like you have this transition of, people that own businesses, millennials, right, that are going out of the workforce, want to retire, and then you have people, like you that worked in private equity and are now buying this small business and trying to, change it, make it slightly bigger. And on these niche opportunities, I think it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and what happens when things are commoditized? It's deflationary, right? And so like human cost stripped out of the equation, open source software taking over, and then abundance with physical resources, right? Raw materials, everything just goes towards zero, right? The cost of energy, maybe that's fusion, maybe that's renewable energy at scale, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, like you don't need that much money to live like kings did in the 18th and 19th century. So I think there is a techno-optimist perspective. Read that by Mark Andreessen. I think he's one of the sharpest people in Silicon Valley, and he's pro-open source, and he's pro-technology. And so, I don't know where I was going with that thought, but what makes you optimistic about the future of technology?
The possibilities that the technology enables, right? The things that you can do, right? If you are trying to, do hard things right now, and you have technology that can enable you to solve things that are on your way, right? That relieves pain. That's exciting. It's very exciting. I think that's what excites me. And, for when I mention repetitive tasks, right? You don't have to do repetitive tasks. I'm looking forward to the year or the era in which I now want to send an email and forward something that's, helping a friend from a WhatsApp to an email, and just thought is done.
Yeah, or the email comes in and the AI knows you so well that you don't even have to be involved with the process at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the analogy would almost be, it reduces the repetitive things, and like let's be grateful for where we are in a first world country, right?
Yeah.
Like rewind 2,000 years and you were breaking your back building a pyramid, right? And so like you're sitting in front of a desk, you're making a good wage, you go home to your beautiful house, you're sitting on a couch, you're watching Netflix. Our lives are pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah.
And imagine the delta between where we are now and where we were then.
Yeah.
And think about what that world might look like 10 to 15 years in the future with technology bringing us there.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful world that we cannot even fathom.
Yeah, and something that I'm very passionate about is, what you describe, yes, it's a reality today in America, in certain pockets of America and, developed countries. But what I'm very excited about, and also about this technology, is that it just levels the playing field. Right now, you
That's
know,
interesting.
I go to Portugal, and the new generation that is out of college now is watching the same podcasts that you are, is consuming the same knowledge that you are, is using the same technologies, and is having a level of exposure that was not there 10 years ago. And I think that, and Portugal is, still first world country, right? But what about all the other countries in the world? In Africa, people start having smartphones, people start having access to internet, right? In Nigeria, a lot of people are into crypto in Nigeria. People started learning how to code in Solidity, which is the language to interact with the Ethereum blockchain.
Right.
And you just start leveling the playing field with technology, and it's very exciting. I spent a year in Africa, in Angola.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Was very interesting experience. Very, very particular experience, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people call the iPhone the bicycle of the mind.
Yeah.
I feel like that definition should be assigned to AI, right? It's just going to lift so many people out of poverty.
Yep.
I mean, think about a world where we're able to cure cancer and then all disease, right? Where, Elon is beaming Wi-Fi down on 100% of the population, and a substantial percentage of the population has edge small language models on their phone, acting as a tutor, acting as a doctor, whatever, you could do. It's going to be an incredible world to live in. But the great equalizer is what people call AI, and I feel like I could take the agreement on that stance and the disagreement on that stance, because I think end state, it's a great equalizer, right? Imagine a post-scarcity, abundance, post-human labor economy where people have everything they could possibly desire and then some. That's equal. That's like communism in a Marxian sense, right? Until it was corrupted by Stalin and all those guys. But in the interim period, it's going to completely replace a lot of the middle class. Yeah. And technology is going to be moving so fast that it's going to move a lot of those people into blue collar labor, I think. And then the people that are using AI and wielding it are going to get profoundly rich. I guess, how do you reconcile that with like the equalizer thing as well? I guess they can both happen at the same time.
They can both happen. For me, it's not about equalizing in wealth. It's about equalizing in opportunities. So if you want to create wealth, if you want to do something, you have the opportunity to do it. You have access to education. You level the play field. But then it's still a play field, right? That's how I see it.
Equalization of opportunity.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you have any parting questions? I mean, that was probably a good ending statement.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
I think that's a lot to think about. We'll wait for part 2 with Francisco.
Well, guys, thank you for having me.
Looking forward to it. Let's do it in Lisbon.
It was fun.
Let's do it in Lisbon.
Dude.
Yeah.
Cascais.
You gotta come through.
It's a pleasure, bro. Thank you for coming
Thanks
on.
so much,
Thank you,
man.
guys.
That was awesome.